Okay, we should talk about the newsletter
Yeah.
because ostensibly, this is a newsletter. This is a podcast and newsletter about newsletters,
Yeah.
kind of. Okay, so to situate the listeners, basically, what your newsletter is, it comes out, I think, every Wednesday. It's usually around 1,000, 1,500 words. The structure is like there's a little intro note, some commentary on the real estate world, then story time with Glenda, which seems to be usually the biggest section. I mean, again, you're a storyteller. And then there's a little Glendaism quote and some variation, but that's by and large what it is. This weekly newsletter, you've been doing it for, I think, just over a year now. So how did it come about?
Well, like, everybody asked me, like, "Do you have a newsletter? Do you have a newsletter?
Huh.
Do you have a newsletter?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh. Like, the last thing I need is one more thing to do, you know?" And so someone approached me and said, "Hey, why don't you have a newsletter?" And I was like, "Because I just, like, literally, I don't have the capacity to do it." And so he said to me, Griff said to me, he's like, "What if I could come up with a concept
Hmm.
where it wouldn't really, um, you know, beat you up. You wouldn't be struggling to come up with content."
Yeah, low
He's
lift
like
for you.
he's like, "You have a ton of content." He's like, "There's no reason that you should struggle. Let me see if I can grease the wheels and make it easy for you." And so that's what we did. We looked at some different options. We came up with Beehive, and it has worked amazingly well. We have about 5,000, almost 5,000 subscribers. What I love is over 50% of the newsletters are opened weekly.
Which is
That
quite high.
is very good. And then we have a decent click through rate to me, and it's somewhere between 7 and 10%.
Also very good.
See, in my head, it's not good.
Mhm.
I want 100 people, 100% of the people to click to open it. I
Mhm.
want 70% of the people to click through. Like, to me, in my head, like, I want it to be more, but I have to remind myself. And again, I'm a real estate agent. But
Yeah.
when TikTok reached out to me, they're like, "We can't figure out why people like you because you don't do anything. You don't dance, you don't sing, you don't DIY.
Huh.
Like, you just talk about real estate. And you have this sticky that nobody will leave once they start following you. It's like they can't look away."
Hmm.
And it's kind of happened that similar way with the newsletter. We have very few unsubscribes, which is great. And we have a lot of people that open it. And what I really want people to understand is what is in the newsletter is different than the short form
Yeah.
content.
Because it's less is it less batched than the other ones? Like
It,
what's
it's done weekly.
oh,
Like,
okay, yeah.
it's not like, there is no delay time on it.
Mhm.
Like, what comes in my head on Monday, what comes out my mouth comes onto paper
Yeah.
on Wednesday.
What's
And
so wait,
so
I would
the
love to hear the process because you were saying earlier you have somebody who you work with to write it, which I've talked to a lot of people. Like I talked to some people who write their own. I talked to some people who edit and like manage other writers writing them. But I've been interested to talk to somebody who kind of has a writer they work with. I'm just very fascinated by the process.
Yeah, and this is the what I love about Jen, the writer that I work with,
Hmm.
is that it's almost like a therapy session.
Oh,
And it's like a documentary. So in my head, it's like
well, you were
there
saying,
are
everything you do, it's you talk to your friend, your client, or your therapist, and so this is
exactly.
you talking to your therapist.
Well, and it's perfect because it's a documentary slash therapy, and it really is someone who's getting what's inside my head in that moment out.
Hmm.
And that is, to me, that has really been the magic behind the newsletter. It's been the relationship with Jen. It was so funny because we started with a bunch of cooks in the kitchen,
Okay.
and that annoyed the hell out of me because this one would send a text and that one would send a text. And finally, I just picked up the phone and I called Jen and I said, "Hey, how would you feel if we just set up a phone call every week and I can just talk to you about what's on my mind about real estate, and that's how we make the newsletter?"
Mm.
And she's like, I think that's a phenomenal idea. I said, great, then let's do this. I'll let everybody know this is how we're going to handle it moving forward. And she's like, you haven't talked to anybody yet? I'm like, no. Mm-mm. I said, I figured I'd see if you were in the boat. And if you were in the boat, then I'd go back to them and tell them this is what we were going to do. And it literally has worked out so much better. I feel like that the content is so much fresher. I feel like
Mm.
that the content is just it's your opportunity, the reader, to be in my head.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think that like kind of dictating weekly schedule too is really smart. I guess I want to move on now to the business side, the business of being Glennda Baker.